welcome to US Election Watch. I am Gaurie Dwivedi. Let's get the headlines going. First up, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz kick off the Georgia bus tour to woo voters. Kamala Harris returns to the campaign trail. The focus is now on the swing states. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan touts Kamala Harris as playing a central role in China policy under Biden administration. US assures China that Harris would responsibly manage the ties with Beijing. Donald Trump to focus on economy manufacturing in Michigan rally. Donald Trump and Tulsi Gabbard to hold first joint town hall in Wisconsin. Democrat vice presidential nominee JD Vance blasts Harris. Republican candidate JD Vance blasts Harris over US's Afghanistan withdrawal. Vance talks about Middle East policy in the Wisconsin rally. The big story that we're tracking right now on US Election Watch, the Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz took their campaign to Georgia on Wednesday. Remember, Georgia is one of the swing states that will have a very decisive role to play as to who now wins this race. Georgia, which Democrats narrowly secured in 2020, could be pivotal in this year's election. Their visit focused on energizing young voters. They hit the road in southern Georgia, focusing their efforts on areas with significant black population. The campaign has recently expanded its presence in this region, adding staff and opening new field offices. Liberty County, with a population of nearly 65,000 and around 40% being black, played a key role in the 2020 elections as well, where Democrat nominee Joe Biden won, having cast a strong majority of votes for Joe Biden.
This is no ordinary campaign bus. This armored vehicle, driven by US Secret Service agents, is part of Kamala Harris's bus tour through Georgia, a crucial swing state that the Democrats are keeping a close eye on. It can be recalled that President Joe Biden had won the critical battleground by a thin margin 4 years ago when he defeated former President Donald Trump. On a visit to a school, Harris exclaimed a group of excited children that the country is counting on them.
Our country is counting on you. All of you. You are leaders. By the very fact that you all are here in this room, doing what you do at this incredible school, doing it as one big team, understanding all of the different parts that fit together to create a team.
Georgia is located in southeastern United States and has one of the largest proportions of black residents. A third of the state's population is African American. Kamala Harris's campaign is hoping to woo these voters. According to reports, the Harris campaign is trying to make inroads in GOP strongholds and to use smaller settings to display a softer side of the ticket. Campaign officials have argued that in order to beat Trump in the state, a lot more is needed than Atlanta and the suburbs that delivered for Joe Biden in 2020. The strategy is to attract Republican Party-leaning voters through informal interactions. In a boost to her campaign, the latest Fox News poll shows Harris edging Trump in Georgia 50% to 48%. Meanwhile, experts say that the Indian American community is set to play a crucial role in Georgia, as it is the largest Asian group in the state. In a close race, Indian Americans can make a big difference. Biden had won Georgia by a margin of just 12,000 votes last time. Kamala, who is Indian American, will keep one eye on the group, as a 2024 survey found that 55% of Indian Americans identify as Democrat and 25% as Republicans. However, the number of Indian Americans identifying as Republicans has been increasing since 2020. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, to discuss this in greater detail and to talk about one of these battleground states, which is Georgia, let's get in Farooq Mughal, who's a Georgia state representative, joining us live from Atlanta. We also have Ashwin Ramaswamy, who's running for the Georgia State Senate. Good morning to both of you, and appreciate both of you joining me on this show. Let me start with you, Farooq. How do you see now this race going? It's now all about the battleground states. And let's talk about Georgia first. And let's focus on this. How do you see the campaign stacked up in this state?
Gaurie, thank you for having me. I am State Representative Farooq Mughal, first elected Southeast Asian in the House. I'm super excited. I think what's happening in Georgia with our minority communities, especially with Black voters, especially with Southeast voters, this has been an amazing experience of the President, the VP coming and visiting us. We have registered more volunteers. People are coming out, to vote and volunteer for the campaign. So we're actually super excited to have this, Kamala Harris visiting Georgia.
Ashwin Ramasamy, comment on this as to what should be the priorities of the Kamala Harris campaign now for Georgia. It's a swing state. It will go down right till the wire. How do you see this playing out, and what should be her priorities?
So here's what I see in terms of priorities for the Harris campaign. The first thing is making sure reaching out to all voters who align with these kind of democratic values, really ensuring the Democratic base is energized and willing to turn out. And that's part of what we're seeing now, especially through her tour in the southern part of Georgia, is bringing a lot of voters who maybe typically haven't had the chance to meet presidential candidates, ensuring that they have a voice and reaching out to everyone. That's one piece. And the other piece here, which is really crucial, is reaching out to independent voters, people who are in the middle and just want candidacy. They want a president who is normal, who is able to deliver on what we need for our communities. And it's quite clear that that's what Kamala Harris is providing, as opposed to the Trump-Vance ticket. And that's her goal, and that's what we're working on the ground to ensure we can have that kind of contact.
And this is a question I want to ask both of you, which is about the Indian diaspora, which is about how Indian diaspora is a very significant constituency in Georgia, and how do they view Kamala Harris's campaign? How do they view what all she brings to the table, and her strategy like? Let's start with you, Farooq Mughal, and then we get an Ashwin also on this.
Absolutely. So, we have more than, 50,000, 75,000, South Asian, especially in the Indian community. Everybody is super excited. I think they can make a huge difference. Remember that President Biden actually got 12,000. The victory in Georgia was 12,000. And right now, the way I see it, when I'm campaigning, when I'm talking to people, it's been amazing. It's a lot of people are coming, especially the young generation are coming to volunteer. And I think they can be the margin of victory. You have the voters on the Republican side, you have the voters on the Democratic side. And I think the margin of victory will go towards what the Indian American, South Asian American community is going to do.
Ashwin, comment on that. Farooq also mentioned about some of the younger voters. You represent that age group. What is it that they are looking for in the campaigns, whether it's Harris or Trump? What is it that they want, and what could swing it in their favor?
So what we're looking for as young voters is really new leadership that's looking forward, not just looking at the next 2 years or the next 4 years, but thinking about these long-term investments in our communities. I'm 25 years old. I'm running to be Georgia's youngest state senator and the first Gen Z state senator. And what I've seen is the excitement on the ground has been not only from the South Asian and Indian American communities, which makes up a large portion of my district. Nearly 16,000 South Asians live in my district alone, which is larger than the margin of victory of Joe Biden in 2020. But people across different backgrounds are really excited to see someone who is from the area, grew up here, went to the schools, and is really deciding to come and give back, because that's the kind of perspective that we need. And that's something which it's really clear that the way the Harris-Walz campaign is working, the priorities they're focusing on, whether it's supporting students, focusing on affordable housing, and really thinking about making sure an economy that works for all in the next couple of decades, not just the next couple of years. That's really what young people are looking for, and that's what they're seeing in the Harris-Walz ticket.
It is so heartening to see a 25-year-old young first-time politician, should I be calling you that, joining me on the broadcast. Farooq Mughal, then let me ask you this, that Georgia was also one of the states which was in the reckoning till the very end in the 2020 elections, right? It was right up there. It threw up a result which was challenged by one of the candidates. In the backdrop of that, do you see that sort of overhang this time around as well? And is that something you see from the Republican campaign going forward?
Look, they're going to try to do everything possible. I mean, Georgia is a battleground state. It's all about math, right? And so if you really see how critical the state and how critical is the South Asian, the Indian American vote for Kamala Harris is, I was actually looking at the numbers. And so if we, if Trump wins Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Kamala Harris wins Michigan and North Carolina, the numbers for the electoral votes is going to be 261. And so with Georgia, for either candidate who's going to win, we'll have a final number of 277. And we need 270 to win the presidency. So every single vote of an Indian American and South Asian American in Georgia is going to play a critical role. And I see that, Ashwin and I, we talk about this, that the road to victory to the White House will be from Georgia and will be from Gwinnett County, where we have the largest diaspora of Indian Americans.
Great. And Ashwin, then let me ask you this, that Farooq was making a point about how Indian Americans and the diaspora would be very important, especially in Georgia. But there's also a trend that more and more of them are leaning Republican. So how do you address that, or how do candidates like you address that trend?
It's a great question. I think two things to keep in mind is that we always have people who are vocal minorities. So there are, of course, people on all different sides of the political spectrum. There are people who are Indian Americans who support Republicans. But we're looking at the polling data, looking at the information we saw that like around 70-80% of Indian Americans in my district alone were planning to vote Democrat or planning to vote for me. And I think it's just keeping that in mind that most people are not that politically plugged in. They have certain values that they believe in, and they end up aligning more Democratic Party. There's a lot of folks I talk to who are Indian American, some of these people say they support Republicans, but then I ask them, what are your stances on things like gun safety, things like reproductive health care? And then often they align with Democrats on those kinds of issues. The only issues where they're worried about is they worry about the economy. And it's just a simple argument to talk about how, Trump tanked the economy in 2020 during COVID. Biden helped it bring back to normal. And all these goals and policies that Kamala Harris is bringing on are really going to make sure that we have what we need for the future.
All right.
And then the last thing, go ahead.
Wait,
I'll just, the last thing I'll just say is it's also a matter of representation. People are very excited to see someone who has the kind of background that they wish they see in public service. I would be the first Indian American elected to our legislature. My background, having gone to Stanford, Georgetown, worked in the federal government, it's the kind of thing that people see as helpful in general.
Absolutely. Very quickly, before, since we're running out of time, Farooq, which is that how often does economy come up in these discussions, and how crucial will it be, let's say, in a swing state like Georgia? Very quickly, running out of time.
So you got to realize what records. I mean, Biden administration has done a tremendous job with the infrastructure plan, where we're funding the roads and cities and putting money in people's pocket. So it's very important. And economy is a number one thing. But we also got to look at the future of healthcare. We got to look at the future. And I think Harris campaign represents the American future and who we look like as a diverse nation. So that's going to resonate a lot when people go to the poll.
All right, let's leave it there. Farooq Mughal and Ashwin Ramaswamy, thanks much for joining me on the broadcast. Shifting focus now away from Democrats to what the Republicans are up to. This is a show that tells you what both sides are doing in this election. So the Republican vice presidential candidate, that is JD Vance, appeared at a campaign rally in Wisconsin to rev up support in a battleground state. Remember, Wisconsin is another key battleground state in these elections. JD Vance answered questions on a host of issues related to Middle East policy, saying what they should be doing as an ally of Israel is empowering them to wipe Hamas off the face of earth and get this war over. JD Vance also criticized Kamala Harris for the chaotic withdrawal of American forces from Afghanistan that took place exactly 3 years back. But first up, listen into what he said. We come back and talk more on that.
First of all, how do you solve the crisis between Israel and Hamas and put an end to that conflict? And how concerned are you about the tension building between Israel and Iran right now?
Well, look, I worry about the tension a lot because Kamala Harris has given the Iranians billions of dollars, and they keep on buying weapons and attacking not just Israelis, but they keep on attacking Americans. It's crazy. Stop giving bad guys money. It's not that complicated. It's a very simple principle in American diplomacy. The second thing that I say is, look, it is not our business to micromanage Israel's war in the Middle East. Hamas is an evil organization. Thank you. Hamas is an evil organization. What we should be doing as an ally of Israel is empowering them to wipe Hamas off the face of the earth and get this war over. It's very simple.
All right, a quick update coming in for the assassination attempt on Donald Trump last month. U.S. authorities have confirmed that the individual who attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump acted alone. He was a lone warrior with no evidence suggesting any foreign involvement. But during a press briefing on Wednesday, FBI officials revealed that the motive behind the attack remains unclear. They described the 20-year-old suspect, Thomas Crooks, as having a mixture of ideologies, quote unquote. The FBI also shared details about Crooks' search history and released photographs of the weapon and improvised explosive devices that were discovered in his vehicle. The head of FBI's Pittsburgh office disclosed that Crooks had been searching online for the Trump campaign events as far back as September 2023. Listen in to what Kevin Rojek, the special agent in charge at FBI Pittsburgh field office, had to say.
So we saw through our analysis of all his, particularly his online searches, a sustained, detailed effort to plan an attack on some events, meaning he looked at any number of events or targets. And then when this event was announced, the Trump rally was announced early in July, he became hyper-focused on that specific event and looked at it as a target of opportunity.
All right, now let's turn our focus to an important election issue, which is the relationship that China will have with US post the 2024 elections, and which means where does Trump campaign and the Harris campaign stand when it comes to dealing with China, an extremely important part of the larger geopolitical equation and policy framework that both candidates have put forward. Remember, both sides have had stark views as far as China is concerned. Jake Sullivan also spoke about it when he backed the Democrat candidate Kamala Harris, saying that she has played a very pivotal role as far as what the China policy has been for the Biden administration. He went on to say that the vice president has been a central member of the Biden foreign policy team, a leading member, and has been part of the design and execution of the overall strategy in the Indo-Pacific, essentially giving all credit to Kamala Harris for the equation and the framework under which America and China are now negotiating with each other. How will this change? Whether it's set to be impacted, or will it largely be status quo, irrespective of who comes next in these elections, is the big focus now on the debate. And joining me is John Rossomando, who is the commentator on US national security. Thanks much for joining me, John. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. The China-US relationship is likely to remain in the spotlight and would be a key issue in these elections. First question, how do you see the two campaigns when it comes to the China question?
Well, I see that Kamala Harris has been part of an administration that has undermined the strong stance that the Trump administration had against China. It killed the China initiative aimed at stopping and preventing Chinese influence and espionage operations inside the United States. The Biden administration allowed a Chinese spy balloon to cross the country, collecting vital intelligence. And I think that, the Kamala Harris represents a continuation of the failed policies of the Biden administration. And I think that President Trump would return to a more sober and forthright approach to dealing with China.
Okay, so some of the differences in how China has been dealt under Donald Trump and under Joe Biden, we are playing that out, whether it is the tariff war or whether it is some of the other aspects. John, I want to ask you that how do you see a return in terms of a trade war possibly if Donald Trump comes back to power? Do you see that happening all over again, or do you think there have been some lessons and some learnings in the last 4 years?
Well, I think there probably has been some learning in the last 4 years. Many of the tariffs that Trump put in place have been maintained by the Biden administration. I think that we would end up seeing a stronger stance on the U.S. rebuilding its domestic infrastructure, rebuilding our domestic industries to become less dependent on China, because one of the major problems that we face in defense and in domestic economy is the dependence on China for things like rare earth minerals and for other supply chains.
Okay, but some of the aspects of the Biden administration, one should also point out, is that Joe Biden's administration also raised tariffs on 14 categories of China imports. It also quadrupled the tariffs when it came to electric vehicles coming in from China, some of them going all the way up to 100%, double tariffs on Chinese goods by 50%. So it's also moving in the same direction. So how is it any different, and why do you say that the last 4 years that the China issue hasn't been dealt with the way the Republicans would have wanted it?
I think I'm referring more in terms of China's military belligerence to its threatening of the Philippines in the South China Sea, to its increasing belligerence toward Taiwan. That's where I'm seeing, and along with China's continued espionage against the United States.
So how would a Trump administration, if it were to come, be different in terms of the Taiwan issue, in terms of the North Korea issue, the Japan issue? All of this has the China overhang. So how do you envisage a Trump administration 2.0 being different?
Well, I envision a Trump administration 2.0 being more interested in increasing America's military assets in East Asia, and also in keeping both Taiwan, Japan, Philippines, and our allies on the ball. I mean, right now, you just recently had Japanese Prime Minister Kishida's decision to step aside, so Japan's rearmament remains a question. I think that Trump would continue the policies that he worked on with former Prime Minister Abe to increase Japan as a bulwark against China. Okay. I think that Trump also has a personal relationship with Kim Jong-un. So he would try to leverage personal connections to try to reduce tensions.
All right, so remains to be seen which way this goes, but we're going to come back to the US-China relationship over the course of the next 10 odd weeks as we track these elections very closely. John Rosamondo, thank you so much for taking out the time and speaking to me. Shifting focus now to a bit of history on this show, which is about when was the last time a vice president got elected as the president? Well, it turns out it was way back in 1836. So can Kamala Harris rewrite history for yet another reason? Take a look at this report.
Richard Nixon, Hubert Humphrey, and Al Gore. What do these big names in US politics have in common? They all ran for president while serving as vice president and lost. While Nixon tried and failed in 1960, Humphrey and Al Gore lost in 1968 and 2000 respectively. In fact, since 1836, only one vice president has been elected president, George H.W. Bush. Experts suggest that two factors proved crucial for each vice president who ran for president. The first one was whether the incumbent president was well liked. A vice president can gain from the incumbent president's popularity when vying for the top job. The second factor pertains to the relationship between the president and the vice president. If the relationship is cordial, a vice president benefits, and vice versa. Al Gore came within a whisker of becoming the president but was defeated by George Bush. Though Al Gore's campaign seemed to have been bolstered by incumbent President Bill Clinton's high approval ratings, he distanced himself from Clinton in the wake of the White House scandal involving intern Monica Lewinsky. In the end, the close race was decided by a margin of fewer than 1,000 votes in Florida. With much historical context to look at, Harris will hope for the best, as Biden remains an unpopular president. Meanwhile, the factor working in her favor could be the support she enjoys from the president. With Vishal Vivek, Bureau Report, NDTV World.
All right, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of US Election Watch. Thanks so much for watching.